Welcome, Dr. Rekha Chanderbose. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Dr. Chanderbose is from the University of California in San Diego. She's an associate professor in the Department of Anesthesia, and she is the founder of Women in Anesthesiology. Thank you for being here today.
It's my
Can you,
pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
can you please give us, for those of us who don't know you very well, a brief description about yourself?
Sure. I am, as you said, an associate clinical professor at UC San Diego. I have been in San Diego since 2007. I did my residency at UC San Diego. Um, and in 2000 and I want to say 11 or 12, we started a local women's organization, Women in Anesthesiology, just a local group. And that was largely driven by the fact that we didn't really feel like we had a lot of mentorship or ability to find other women who were also interested in leadership and women in anesthesiology. And at that time at UCSD, we only had one full woman professor. And so it was hard to find people to look forward to. So we started our local group, which then became the larger group. Um, in my personal life, I am interested in gender equity in general and equity, diversity, and inclusion overall. And I was just recently appointed the vice chair for diversity, equity, inclusion for our department, which is a newly minted position. So I'm navigating my way through trying to understand how to best serve the department and the university in that role also.
Amazing that you've actually started this organization, Women in Anesthesiology. You filled a void.
Funny because I think until I did it, I wasn't sure people felt that there was a void.
Mhm.
And so there has been some historical interest in having a group like this, but I think that we happen to be in the right place at the right time for a lot of different reasons. So,
Mhm. So, can you tell me a little bit of how you were able to expand the group, the organization from like a local chapter to now what it is a national organization with chapters all over the country?
I think to some degree I didn't think about how hard it would be to start a national organization. The truth is that I originally had hoped that the ASA would consider partnering with the people who wanted to start a women anesthesiology group as a natural home for that. But the politics of starting a committee in the ASA were challenging at the time, and my personal values were probably a little bit more radical as as an organization. I wanted to be able to really call out and address some of the sources of gender inequity that sometimes being part of a larger group can be very difficult to politically navigate. Although that having been said, the way the group was originally started was that I was awarded a mentor mentee grant through the Committee for Professional Diversity at the ASA.
Mm.
And my mentor was my chair at the time, Dr. Jerry Manicky. I was the mentee, and I used that original seed money just to um, take an informal uh, sort of assessment of whether or not people would be interested in having an organization like this. We had a meeting at the ASA at an offsite location when the ASA was in San Diego. And I used those funds to reserve a room and buy some food and drink and to make a small presentation on what we could do. And 50 people showed up. So there were a lot of people. We were very surprised at the interest. And there were some people who were really great. Kelly McQueen, Madge Owens, people who had started organizations in anesthesiology, not necessarily gender equity organizations, but who had some institutional and historical memory that helped us guide our founding, or helped me guide the founding.
Mm. Wow, that's amazing. And fortunate that people with experience became available to you to kind of help you navigate that. What did you learn from going through this whole process of developing this large organization?
Well, Sometimes it's better not to know what you don't know, because it was just taking one step at a time, starting the organization, and then because we weren't going to be part of the ASA and trying to fundraise for the organization, needing to establish ourselves as an organization you could make a tax deductible donation to in
Mhm.
order to make it easier for people to give us money to start. And so those were some of the original things that I got, um, sort of ended up on my list of things to do. And then creating a group of working physicians, women physicians largely, although not exclusively, to support the organization because we were all working full time, obviously, other interests, sometimes families. And so people were donating money, some people were donating time, some people were donating both. Harriet Huff, who was one of the original people, supported me, and she's my biggest mentor in this. Um, made a financial contribution and has really supported us through her extensive career in leading committees, leading organizations, and being a mentor and a very successful academic physician. She really helped us figure out sort of what next steps were. Um, I would say, one of the bigger lessons I learned, and I was very lucky that Amy Pearson, who's at the University of Iowa, Amy was the next president. And one of the things that I did not do a very good job at was figuring out how to distribute the different roles. So creating a true infrastructure for succession. I think the most successful nonprofit organizations, anybody should be able to lead in the organization, won't founder. There should be people who can step up, know enough about what's going on, can take on the next thing. And that's really, Amy did an amazing job establishing a true board, true division of responsibilities, regular meetings, people. But there was really a very core, consistent group of people who, through a combination of work, just information and advice, and money, personal money, were really able to launch the organization.
Mhm. Mhm. That's wonderful that you guys have been able to find women who are willing to step up to those roles and help you navigate it to propel the organization forward. What challenges did you encounter when you started the organization?
So that was one of my biggest challenges, was really a sense of not being able to delegate appropriately, because to some degree I didn't know what I needed to delegate. And it was always, I was discovering what I needed to delegate at the same moment that that work needed to be done. And the next biggest challenge has been the funding.
Must bring a lot of joy to you to see that it is successful and that it's taken a life of its own and that other people have committed themselves to the cause as well.
That's definitely my biggest happiness. And my second biggest sort of sense of accomplishment, I think, is that we, as an organization, I I think probably amongst most women's organizations, are the most radical medical organization in terms of, it's not radical, but in terms of progressive politics and really embracing some of the um, true issues that impact equity and diversity in medicine and inclusion. Some of the organizations that we can join tend to shy away from those issues because they are viewed as too controversial. Whereas for me, it's sort of the lifeblood of why we're doing this. It can't be too, equity just can't be so controversial that we don't address it. Inclusion can't be so controversial that we don't address it. And I'm certainly not going to be part of an organization for gender equity that doesn't address how intersectional identities for women in medicine are very important. You can't really slice out little sections and support people. We embraced early on that it's a little bit of a trite aphorism, but that a rising tide lifts all boats,
Hmm.
and that we, by increasing opportunity in a really more holistic way, that we would improve everyone's experience. And I think that that has been true so
Hmm.
far, which is
Hmm.
really good too.
Hmm. Hmm. In closing, if you had any advice that you would like to give to women entering the field of anesthesia.
Try to find something that you really like to do,
Hmm.
because it's a long career and you don't want to spend the most of it doing work you don't enjoy. I believe really firmly now, as I've aged, that my belief system, which is it's not an angry one, it's just a realistic one, is that the institution has the institution's own needs as number one. And a corollary to that means you need to have your own needs as number one. So A lot of women talk about when they should have their first child, infertility issues, how to get the right sponsor and mentor. And there are a lot of questions in their junior career trajectory that I think really can be answered by saying, what is the absolute best thing for me in this moment? Disregard what other people are going to think about that choice that you make, um, and move forward in that way. I think the inverted productivity of work is a real thing for women. So the um, time overlap between medical training and childbearing years makes a
Mhm.
huge impact on women. And while I don't think that most women's issues are necessarily related to maternity, we know that women who don't even have children have a maternity penalty, right? Because they're considered, it's considered bad for women to not have children. It's considered bad for women to have children. It's really a catch 22.
Mhm.
And so I would say that there's actually data to say that women are just as productive, if not more productive, than men, even if they've had children during the early part of their career. This is not in anesthesia, the data,
Mhm.
but it's in liberal arts data. But the assumption is that they're going to be less productive because the assumption is that their mental energy is going to be divided between their family and their work in a way that it isn't for a man. Whether or not those assumptions are true almost doesn't matter. You have to do the best thing for yourself in the moment. And there's a there are a lot of resources out there for how to prioritize your values as a person and as a professional and create a rubric that allows you to enmesh both of those things,
Mhm.
maybe not perfectly, but more than we were ever trained to do.
Mhm.
And so Linda Pololi has a publication about this that's on the Women in Anesthesiology website, the link to that. It's pretty long. You have to sit down and really, it's not something you can do in 10 minutes. You really need to be thinking about where you see yourself, what's important to you, how to create those opportunities, and how to present them to your leadership so that you can leverage your passions and marry them to your job while still preserving your sense of integrity in terms of everything else that you want to do. But those resources are out there. And what I would say is, I wish I had done some of those things a little bit earlier, and understood that worrying too much about what other people would think about me and the opportunities I'd be given didn't, wouldn't, didn't serve me well and wouldn't necessarily serve anyone well. We really have to keep moving with our lives while we're trying to create these opportunities. I think the other thing is you have to understand that it may not be equitable for you. Like, equity work only makes it possible. It doesn't make it easier for women to succeed than men. It only makes it possible for women to succeed in the same arena, and they will still face challenges that men don't. Really going to, you may have to be much more focal and vocal about going to your leadership to say, this is the work I want to do. Try to create those opportunities for yourself. And if you continue to find yourself in a hostile work climate, something that you really feel like is not supporting your professional growth, that it might not be the right institution for you. Sometimes that is the answer. It's not always easy because you're in a community and you may or may not have other links to that community that aren't related to your work. But I think it's not uncommon where you think this shutout is not going to ever end. And so if you have a desire or a path that you'd like to walk that you're not able to in the job that you're in, those doors never, like, we tell ourselves doors are closed, but really some of these changes we can make, it's the voice in our head saying that's impossible or too risky or too dangerous. We're not very, we know doctors are very risk averse, right? We know that from the way we study and test and interpret labs, and anesthesiologists are probably the most risk averse of all doctors. But you have to get over your risk aversion to some degree if you want to take some bigger leaps, if you're
Mhm.
not being supported in the place that you're in.
Thank you. It's wonderful advice. I appreciate your time and efforts, and um, I will look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.